Or you scroll away. Know this: the woman who once stood beside the most powerful man in modern history has a story that reads like a spy thriller, except every fact in it is real. She vanished from Vladimir Putin's official biography as though she'd never existed, only to reappear years later in million-dollar villas across Europe. Whispers about offshore accounts and secret marriages swirled in the Kremlin's bloodless corridors. Some claimed she'd hidden in a remote monastery. Others said she wielded influence over telecom empires from behind the scenes. None of it felt conceivable until you look closer at the shadows. Born on January 6, 1958, in Leningrad, Lyudmila Alexandrovna Scribneva arrived into a city still scarred by wartime ruins. The cold winters and shattered facades mirrored her family's struggle. Her father toiled 12-hour shifts in a metal factory. Her mother stood behind a cashier's counter just to keep the lights on. Privacy was a luxury they could not afford. In their cramped communal apartment, Lyudmila shared a single bed with her younger sister, Olga, and learned early that warmth came from shared effort, not from central heating. By age 10, Lyudmila had already become a second mother to Olga, cooking, cleaning, even haggling with grocers to stretch meager rubles. While other kids chased pigeons in the Neva's shadow, she curled up with borrowed books, dreaming of another life. She performed monologues in front of peeling walls, memorizing lines from Chekhov and Gorky. When audition season arrived for Leningrad's prestigious theater institute, she marched into the rehearsal room with boundless confidence, only to be turned away. The rejection stung, but also ignited a fire. If the stage wouldn't have her, she'd find another stage elsewhere. Lyudmila took on every job Russia's bureaucracy would hand her. She delivered mail in biting sub-zero winds, kept watch in nursing wards, and sorted rubber stamps in municipal offices, all for pocket change. In 1975, she enrolled at Leningrad State University. She was supposed to graduate in 5 years. Instead, she stayed 11, becoming fluent in Spanish, German, and French. By working nights at the Soviet post office, sorting letters for 60 rubles per month, she eked out enough to buy plain bread and thin soup. Her dorm room, shared with 3 other students, offered barely enough heat. Some days she skipped meals entirely, savoring the idea that every sacrifice brought her closer to her dream. And what was that dream? To rewrite her own story. At university, she joined every drama circle she could find, performing in Spanish for exchange students who marveled at her accent. On stage, she was luminous, energetic, charismatic, alive in a way that felt almost irreconcilable with the quiet figure who would later become First Lady of Russia. Peers described her as a force of nature, fearless, probing, and eager to connect across cultures. By the mid-1980s, her linguistic prowess caught the attention of Aeroflot recruiters. Fewer than 3 in every 100 applicants made the cut. The 6-month training regime tested everything: first aid simulations, psychological screening, and background clearances that dove deeper than ordinary Soviet security vetting. Her fluency in Spanish and German qualified her for the coveted international routes: Cuba, Nicaragua, East Berlin. For the first time, she glimpsed the luxury of Western hotels, the bright neon of Havana's nightclubs, and the sleek promotion racks of Frankfurt's airports. In her meal stipend, she tasted exotic fruits that Russia's ration books couldn't summon. But every flight held another secret passenger, KGB minders tasked with logging whispers and mapping connections. Crew members knew they were part of an intelligence apparatus, reporting any odd behavior or casual foreign language exchange. The flights over the Ural Mountains often skirted brutal storms, and emergency landings reminded everyone that each takeoff could be their last. She learned to remain calm under pressure, one moment administering CPR, the next diffusing a political dispute between diplomats. Her time at Aeroflot ended abruptly in 1980 after a scandal. She was accused of selling sanctioned Soviet snacks to passengers. In the black market lore of the era, flight attendants hawked cigarettes, liquor, even banned Western trinkets. Penalties could mean years behind bars. To save face, she quietly resigned and returned to academia, burying the scandal under a veneer of student life. In hindsight, the controversy served as a rehearsal for future shadows. Instead of canceling her, it sharpened her survival instincts. It was on one of those fleeting pre-flight visits to Leningrad, just 3 days in the city, that she encountered a young KGB translator named Vladimir Putin. He had an extra ticket to a comedy show at the Arkady Rykhin Theater. Their first meeting was unremarkable, yet electric. He arrived late, never looking her way until the final bow, when he offered a shy apology and a knowing smile. She didn't yet grasp the magnitude of his world, nor did she suspect the seismic shifts her own life would soon endure. After their brief encounter at the Arkady Rykhin Theater, Lyudmila and Vladimir's paths converged unexpectedly fast. Within months, a courtship began in the shadowy corridors of KGB offices and university lecture halls. He introduced himself as a translator, she as a philology student. Their conversations ranged from Cervantes to Chekhov, but always carried an undercurrent of unspoken power. On July 28, 1983, they married on a modest steamer cruising the Neva River, a ceremony so discreet that only a handful of witnesses knew the bride was the future First Lady of Russia. Behind closed doors, she learned the true nature of his work: covert operations, surveillance, and national secrets too dangerous to share even with a spouse. She quickly realized that loyalty meant silence, and any stray whisper could seal her fate. Between 1985 and 1990, Lyudmila followed Putin to Dresden, where he served in the Soviet intelligence station. While Putin operated behind false names and diplomatic passports, she found work teaching German at an exchange school. She immersed herself in East German life, attending lectures on Brechtian theater and absorbing every nuance of cultural shifts as the Berlin Wall cracked at the seams. That experience shaped her worldview. She saw not just the ideological fracture of a communist state, but also the human cost behind reunification. Late nights grading essays, she taught students to translate both language and context, using real-life stories instead of dry grammar tables. Her adaptability impressed local colleagues, who called her Die russische Leningraderin mit Herz, the Russian from Leningrad with a heart. Her reputation quietly blossomed thereafter. By 1990, Lyudmila had returned to Leningrad State University as a lecturer, teaching German philology during the tumultuous collapse of the Soviet Union. She introduced innovative curricula, integrating East German literature and contemporary cultural studies into her lessons. Her methods stood in stark contrast to the rigid Soviet pedagogy. Students memorized stories instead of rote vocabulary, debated historical narratives instead of reciting propaganda. Under her guidance, female students emerged as independent thinkers, inspired by her own resilience. Yet, as the country fractured politically, she also faced personal upheaval: motherhood. Her daughters, Maria and Katerina, claimed her evenings, but she balanced lecture halls and bedtime stories with strategic precision. In a period when academic posts were rare and fiercely competitive, Lyudmila not only survived, she thrived. Her success earned her respect, but also whispered envy among colleagues. While her academic career blossomed, another opportunity surfaced in 1998. Lyudmila accepted an administrative role at Telecom Invest, a company entwined with Putin's inner circle and rapidly expanding into one of Russia's largest telecom conglomerates. Officially, she answered phones and scheduled meetings, but behind the scenes she processed critical documents, licensing agreements, stock allocations, and strategic partnerships. These files paved the way for Telecom Invest's claim to 65% of the St. Petersburg cellular market and near absolute dominance of city-pay phones. Off the record, insiders whispered that her meticulous oversight ensured key transactions remained hidden from public scrutiny. Her clean public record served as the perfect cover, masking the flow of billions through offshore accounts. She had stepped into a web of power that few outsiders truly understood. Unseen by most, her name became a silent anchor in a vast empire. In 2013, everything changed in a single cold moment. After a performance of the ballet La Esmeralda at the Kremlin Palace, state television announced Vladimir and Lyudmila's divorce. No tearful speeches, no embraces, just a sterile communiqué delivered with whispered finality. Within months, her name vanished from Kremlin websites, as though she had never existed. Yet Lyudmila reappeared almost immediately, this time as a property magnate. Villas in France and Spain purchased through Cyprus shell companies. Luxury apartments in Switzerland, plus whispers of hidden monasteries. One report claimed her new husband was decades younger. Another insisted she'd built a private network of offshore accounts. Both theories fueled fascination and fear among those who watched her transform from Russia's quiet first lady into a haunting mystery. By December 2023, the veil finally lifted in a dramatic twist. French authorities seized her 5.4 million Anglet villa, citing money laundering investigations tied to Transparency International. Public records revealed her offshore holdings and questioned the legitimacy of transfers worth tens of millions. In Russia, her name re-entered public discourse, once erased, now resurrected in headlines that mixed scandal and awe. Today, Lyudmila Shakhrabneva's true story remains obscured by competing rumors, secret monasteries, hidden estate portfolios, or a simple desire to disappear. Yet one fact stands clear. The woman who once stood beside the most powerful man in modern history refused to vanish completely. Her secrets still beckon, waiting for the next curious mind to unravel them, relentlessly waiting. Her retreat from the public eye after the 2013 divorce was anything but quiet. In December 2023, that silence shattered when French authorities stormed the gates of the Anglet villa, seizing the estate and its ornate furnishings. Constructed in the 1920s, Villa Susanna sat on 5,000 square meters of manicured lawns overlooking the Atlantic, its grand colonnades and marble statues echoing the faded opulence of a bygone era. Investigators from France's Office of Financial Crimes, acting on a tip from Transparency International, traced the purchase back to a Cyprus shell company. Their findings painted a vivid picture of convoluted transactions. Tens of millions moved through Bermuda trusts, rerouted via Latvian banks, and funneled into the villa's renovation. Luxury cars were delivered under false identities, and every cent of rent paid by VTB Bank and other corporate tenants passed through accounts in jurisdictions designed to obfuscate ownership. What had once been the whispered domain of rumor now lay exposed under floodlights of legal scrutiny, forcing the world to ask how a former First Lady could amass such power without a traceable passport to her wealth. But the Anglet Manor was just the first piece of the puzzle. Around the same time, Spanish authorities quietly froze 2 Marbella properties, a cliffside duplex valued at over $1 million and a sleek penthouse overlooking the Mediterranean. Both purchases had exploited Spain's Golden Visa program, which grants residency permits to non-EU buyers investing €500,000 in real estate. Neighbors described a steady stream of sleek black sedans and unmarked SUVs prowling through security gates, sometimes pausing only long enough to drop off maintenance crews or high-priced artwork. Court filings revealed that these apartments were held by offshore vehicles registered in Cyprus and the British Virgin Islands, each layered to distance the true beneficiary from prying regulators. Mortgages for part of the purchase were arranged through Spanish banks, but repayments originated from accounts in Switzerland under the name Lyudmila Putina, a name scrubbed from Putin's records, but forever etched across ledgers thousands of miles away. The dual enforcement actions in France and Spain transformed whisper networks of Russian expatriates into formal investigations, dissolving the protective sheen of diplomatic immunity and state secrecy that had long shielded her. Even more elusive was her presence in Switzerland, where a quiet apartment in Davos became her stealth sanctuary. Official property registries listed her as a nominal tenant, but banking leaks suggested she held a stake in a high-end chalet through a Liechtenstein trust. Media reports hinted that her visits coincided with Davos' annual economic forum, a time when powerful figures gather behind closed doors. There, insider sources claimed she attended gala dinners and private dinners alike, conversing in perfect German and French, blending seamlessly into corridors of global finance. No cameras ever captured her arrival, and the photographs that circulated were sourced from third-hand bouquet shots of her boarding a private jet. Swiss prosecutors, bound by strict client confidentiality laws, never confirmed an active investigation. Yet the lingering suggestion of money laundering, tax evasion, and real estate shell games in some of the world's most secure banking havens added another layer of intrigue to her legend. Her financial footprint didn't end with bricks and mortar. Behind the scenes, Lyudmila cultivated an unlikely vehicle for her influence, a nonprofit known as the Center for Development of Interpersonal Communications. On paper, it offered workshops in archetypal psychology, librarian training courses, and brain gymnastics, sessions costing a few rubles each. In reality, grant documents revealed multi-million ruble disbursements funneled through a municipal affiliate of Russian railways, plus city government contracts that magically tripled the center's revenue in a single year. Despite legal requirements, the nonprofit never published detailed financial reports, leaving watchdogs to piece together stray invoices and contract awards. Some programs were ghost classes held in empty mansions, while others involved seminars led by obscure consultants who disappeared once the payments cleared. Journalists who tried to probe deeper found their requests stonewalled by official claims of national security concerns. The nonprofit's opaqueness became legend among investigative circles, a textbook case of how soft power can be wielded silently, building networks of loyalty without ever revealing the true engine of financing. Amid the property seizures and nonprofit mysteries, the rumor mill churned endlessly. Some insisted Lyudmila had taken vows in a remote Orthodox monastery near the Estonian border, taking the name Sister Euphemia and living in penance. Others claimed she lived under a new identity in Siberia, disguised as a schoolteacher in a town so small even Google Maps barely registered it. Digital footprints, phone pings, hotel check-ins, Instagram likes were traced back to anonymized proxies and VPNs routed through Turkey and Malaysia. Every so often, a casual sighting at a London bookstore or a Vienna concert hall would ignite a frenzy of social media posts, only to be debunked by video not matching her gait or build. Even her daughters, Maria and Katerina, who once stood by her during state events, disappeared from public view, fueling speculation that custody agreements had forced them abroad. The combination of selective rumors and tactical silence turned Lyudmila into an icon of vanishing acts. No one knew how much was truth and how much was deliberate misdirection. Yet despite relentless legal battles, her story refuses to fade. Each new revelation prompts deeper questions. How did a woman, so thoroughly expunged from a nation's official history, amass fortunes beyond the reach of any legislature? How did she navigate corridors of power without ever holding a formal government title? The answers lie buried beneath layers of shell companies, confidential court records, and half-told tales from former aides too frightened to speak. One thing is certain: her life became its own masterclass in survival, adapting to seismic shifts from post-war Leningrad to the corridors of global finance. For every file seized by authorities and every rumor debunked by police, another shadowy chapter emerges, reminding us that some stories are never fully written, only hidden, waiting for the right storyteller to piece them back together. Behind the headlines, Lyudmila's life unfolds as a relentless study in adaptation. From the crumbling communal apartment of her youth to the gilded halls of European villas, she mastered the art of existing in plain sight, yet always one step removed from scrutiny. Her legacy is woven from threads of survival, ambition, and secrecy. But what drove her beyond mere endurance? Was it the desire for independence, the need to carve a space free from her husband's shadow, or a deeper longing for self-determination? To understand this, we must return to her early ambitions: the stage. Acting was never just a childhood fancy. It was her first confrontation with vulnerability, the exposure of emotion, and the art of constructing facades that feel authentic. When the Theatre Institute turned her away, she took that bitter lesson and repurposed it, refusing to be a side character in someone else's story. In the Soviet landscape, roles were assigned by bureaucratic decree, not personal choice, so Lyudmila learned early that, to change her own script, she needed to collect credentials and allies. Her fluency in Spanish, German, and French was more than academic achievement. It was an investment in mobility and autonomy. When she stepped onto the tarmac in Havana or walked the corridors of East Berlin, she was not just a hostess, she was an observer, absorbing political undercurrents as acutely as she corrected a passenger's mispronunciation. She gathered scraps of information like treasures, constructing mental maps of foreign markets, cultural shifts, and power dynamics. Those intangible assets later served as her compass when navigating the labyrinth of oligarchic networks and offshore conglomerates. Resilience became her hallmark. In the aftermath of the Aeroflot scandal, when she was accused of illicitly selling Soviet sandwiches to passengers, she reframed the incident not as a moral failure, but as a strategic lesson in risk assessment and crisis management. Crisis does not forge character, it exposes it. Lyudmila's response was always tempered by calculation. She refused to be reduced to a victim. Instead, she transformed obstacles into opportunities, pivoting swiftly to academia and then to the administrative heart of Russia's telecom revolution. Her official title at Telecom, Invest might rid, administrator, but behind the scenes she was a gatekeeper of licensing deals and stock allocations that shaped national infrastructure. Contrast framed her narrative. The same woman who delivered mail in Blizzard's later processed billion-ruble contracts in a private Moscow office. The same linguist who taught German grammar to undergraduates emerged as the invisible hand guiding telecom oligarchs. That duality was her public and private selves in harmony. To the outside world, she seemed content to vanish into anonymity. To insiders, she was an indispensable node in a sprawling network of influence. She embodied presence through absence, never fully in the spotlight, yet impossible to ignore by those who mattered. Her personal relationships reflected this complexity. With Putin, she practiced silence as survival. Loyalty means silence. She once whispered to a confidante over chipped porcelain, her fingers tracing the rim of a teacup. In Dresden, she watched her husband recede nightly into clandestine briefings, feeling the slow erosion between intimacy and statecraft. Later, when she walked away from the Kremlin palace stage, her departure was as choreographed as the most intricate ballet, rehearsed, emotion-laden, yet under her control. If she emerged from that divorce wounded, she cloaked her scars behind tailored coats and designer sunglasses, adopting new identities with the precision of a master strategist. Through strategic feints, she maintained silence as a form of power. Rumors of monastery vows or remote Siberian hidayouts thrived precisely because she never offered definitive refutation. That ambiguity allowed her to define her story on her own terms, or deny it entirely. In a world dominated by instant leaks and viral footprints, she chose analog shadows, leveraging the very secrecy tools her husband once mastered. Every report of a Monaco shopping spree or Zurich gala attendance became a piece of performance art rather than a personal confession. Her retreat into private life was far from retreating into obscurity. Instead, she remapped her influence, transferring it to ventures that operated in plain sight, but with layers of legal and financial complexity. She cultivated alliances with cultural institutions, quietly underwriting restoration projects for historic libraries and donating millions to Orthodox monasteries. Though some called these acts piety, others saw them as strategic investments in soft power, constructing goodwill that might outlive the fickle currents of politics. Through this network, she maintained contact with dissidents, intellectuals, and expatriates, hosting intimate salons in Paris and London that explored literature and linguistics under the guise of genteel fellowship. Guests left believing they had simply enjoyed culture. She left them aligned with her unspoken agenda. Now, as her properties in France, Spain, and Switzerland sit frozen in legal limbo, the contours of her influence invite fresh scrutiny. Some propose she will re-emerge as a cultural patron in Paris, hosting salons for exiled Russian literati. Others predict a quiet return to academia under a pseudonym. But whatever path she chooses, one element remains truly constant. Lyudmila was never content to follow a script written by others. Instead, she rewrote it, act by act, chapter by chapter, emerging not as a footnote in history, but as its most elusive author. Some mysteries never rest, and Lyudmila's story remains one of the most tantalizing puzzles on the global stage. Even as her most conspicuous holdings lie frozen beneath legal injunctions, the quieter threads of her influence continue to stretch across borders. Consider the astute timing of her art donations. Priceless Russian avant-garde sculptures gifted to museums in Bilbao and Brussels just weeks before major sanctions rounds. Each gesture carried an echo of soft power, a reminder that she could shape narratives of culture and heritage, even when barred from formal halls of diplomacy. With every anonymous donation, she tapped into an age-old strategy: when you cannot march at the forefront, you leave footprints in the sands of time. The monastic rumors that once cast her as a cloistered penitent now carry a different resonance, a woman who wields speculative mystique as her shield. Behind closed doors, her confidantes, few and fiercely loyal, say she pursues two complementary goals. The first is to forge a legacy that transcends her former title. That means supporting linguistics programs at European universities in cities like Hamburg and Milan, where scholarships bear the name Shakhribneva in fine print. The second is to ensure her daughters remain insulated from the political storm that surrounds any Russian power player. Maria and Katerina, now in their late 30s and early 40s, have pursued lives in academia and environmental activism, respectively. Each hobby, each career turn, reflects a deliberate pivot away from Kremlin entanglements. By sponsoring their paths, Lyudmila both distances herself from the regime's optics and crafts a quiet counter-narrative, a matriarch who insists that family honor springs from personal integrity, not inherited status. Meanwhile, the digital footprint she leaves is as calculated as her real-world maneuvers. A handful of anonymized email newsletters to former Aeroflot colleagues drop once every few months, each containing nothing more than abstract reflections on resilience and cultural exchange. They are unsigned, devoid of selfies or personal anecdotes, but their tone mirrors the voice we know, measured, cryptic, alive with that scholar's precision in translation. In an era when every public utterance is twisted into headlines, she has mastered a minimalist logogram, just enough to remind her network that she endures, without ever revealing where or under whose protection. Experts call it a form of strategic silence, a technique Putin himself honed in his intelligence days, now perfected in a civilian guise. Yet, for all her skill in self-erasure, a counterforce mounts. Investigative journalists in Eastern Europe and North America have begun collaborating on a digital archive tentatively titled The Vanished First Lady. Using leaked court documents, classified shipping manifests, and open-source intelligence. Everything from flight tracker data to defunct email server logs, they piece together a digital mosaic of her last known appearances. Every fragment, however small, carries disproportionate weight. A single photograph of her stepping off a private jet in Zurich. A grainy street surveillance frame of her walking in Berlin, a contract for linguistic software in Geneva. With data so disparate, No one can yet trace a continuous timeline, but the mere existence of the archive demonstrates an evolving battleground. In the contest between authority and truth, Lyudmila's story has become emblematic of the modern fugitive, able to slip beneath the wires of conventional tracking, yet vulnerable in the global grid of digital traces. Her trajectory also offers a mirror for understanding how modern power can bypass traditional offices and titles. Once, authority was stamped by constitution or crown. Now, it flows through networks of shell companies, cultural endowments, and encrypted newsletters. Lyudmila transformed the power of proximity, being married to an intelligence officer who became president, into a power of projection, investing in ideas and institutions rather than parades and press briefings. She repurposed the very secrecy that once bound her into a weapon for long-term autonomy. Contrast this with the publicly scripted lives of many former spouses of world leaders, whose legacies fade into routine charity galas and memoirs. Lyudmila never penned a tell-all book. Instead, she authored a living document whose chapters are coded into land registries, non-profit filings, and the silent corridors of European academic institutions. As you consider her next move, remember that the art of influence often thrives in the shadows. Could she reemerge at a literary conference in Dublin, moderating a panel on translation? Might she surface in Tokyo, attending an international forum on post-Soviet linguistics? Or will she continue to orchestrate from behind the scenes, her name woven into legal footnotes and whispered in financial crime circles? One thing we know, Lyudmila Scribneva will never follow anyone else's script. She has rewritten her own, line by line, adapting to new contexts and rewriting power's grammar. And if there is one certainty left in this saga, it's that wherever she appears next, publicly or in the peripheries, history will watch, eager to uncover the next hidden chapter.